Go ahead, guys.
Oh, good morning, everybody. We're here at the Eastern Star home in Mount Vernon, Ohio, with the Knox County Board of Elections. And what you can see here is an example of what's happening at 143 different locations all around Ohio. Of course, I sent out the order on Monday following the governor's declaration of a public health emergency that we should protect the health and safety of Ohio senior citizens by removing polling locations from senior residential facilities such as this one. It was a difficult decision. It required a lot of work by our county boards of elections. As elections officials tend to do, they rose to the occasion. And all throughout Ohio, county boards of elections have relocated those polling locations to a location where there are not senior citizens living, where we know obviously our senior citizens are the most vulnerable to this virus. And so the next step is, of course, to make sure that we're notifying voters. We're taking a lot of steps to do that. First, we're making sure to use our own social media accounts to push the word out. Our county boards of elections are doing the same. Next, we're partnering with community organizations. There's a whole list of folks that have made this their cause and their life's work to advocate for voters. Folks like the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, the A. Philip Randolph Institute, and of course both political parties in the state. So we've worked to push this information out to them to share with their network, because they have great grassroots networks that they can inform as well. And of course, I do want to commend the members of Ohio's Press Corps, because in many cases they've brought down their paywalls on their newspapers and other websites to make sure that they're performing a public information function during this emergency time. And that's really admirable, particularly given all the stress that folks in the media are under, and we really appreciate their efforts on that. One of the other things that many counties are doing is sending out a notification by mail. Not every county is able to do that, but many counties are notifying the affected voters by mail that their location has moved. And then, of course, on election day, when voters show up at a location like this, and this would have been a location for, I think, close to 5,000 registered voters here in Knox County, they would see a sign on the door like this. And of course, what it says is, "Attention voters, in response to coronavirus concerns, the Board of Elections has moved to the polling location." I like the idea as well that they've prepared a map, simple 8.5 by 11 that they printed economically at their board office, and it shows voters how to get to where they're going. Of course, it's not ideal with 8 days notice to have to move a polling location, but again, we're rising to the occasion here, and we're making sure that we can accomplish two goals at once. First of all, the health and safety of Ohioans is not negotiable. That's something that as public officials has to be our top concern, and in this case, the health and safety of the residents of this home. But we can also, at the same time, by acting thoughtfully, make sure that we're able to conduct a free and a fair and accessible election coming up on Tuesday, March 17th. A couple reminders for folks. Elections voting is both a right and a responsibility, right? The responsibility that voters have is to check their polling location. They can do so at voteohio.gov/coronafacts. Again, we chose that name intentionally because this is about facts, not fear. This is about getting the right information out there. And the fact is that it will be safe to come and vote on Election Day. A polling location is not a mass gathering. Please understand that the kind of mass gatherings that Governor DeWine and the Ohio Department of Health have banned in Ohio, and that's a smart public policy that they've put in place, are where you're bringing people in from maybe even hundreds of miles around, like an athletic event, and you're putting perhaps tens of thousands of people in one room to breathe the same air for a couple hours, and that's obviously an activity that we're not going to be doing in Ohio over the next couple of weeks. But a polling place is very different from that. A polling place is an opportunity for a neighborhood gathering. Effectively, what you're doing is bringing people together that probably live within a couple miles of each other anyway. They're going to spend just a few minutes walking into a very clean environment where the machines are wiped down and where hand washing is observed and that kind of thing. And they'll be casting their ballot and they'll be walking out. A polling location is safe for both voters and for the poll workers that work there. But we want to put out the call for poll workers. Every county in Ohio always is looking for poll workers. It's a patriotic duty, and there are a lot of people that are perhaps not going to classes now. Think of our college students. There are a lot of people that may not be working right now as a result of the public health emergency that we're enduring. So consider signing up to be a poll worker. the place to do that. And by the way, the boards of elections are conducting poll worker training throughout the next couple days, and so there's still plenty of time to sign up to be a poll worker, is ohiosos.gov/defenddemocracy. We chose that website name very intentionally because when you sign up to be a poll worker, you are in fact helping us defend democracy. Please consider that a call to duty for patriotic Ohioans to help us perform this important function. And again, by acting thoughtfully, we will perform the dual responsibilities of protecting health and safety while at the same time conducting a free and a fair and accessible election next Tuesday. And it's our elections officials that are making that happen. Thanks so much, everybody. Look forward to questions that you guys have.
My questions are for the Board of Elections first. When we look at the need for poll workers here in Knox County, what is the situation? How are you guys doing? And do you need a lot? Do you need a few? What are we talking about?
Kim?
We need a few. Yes, a few workers. Like to maybe get some more. We have colleges here, get some college students more involved in being poll workers. We have gotten some recommendations or some people interested through the Secretary of State's website that get forwarded to us. So yes, always looking. And this time of year, with people going to Florida during the winter and having the March primary, a little more hard to get workers this time than it typically is.
And remember, in Ohio, 17-year-olds can be poll workers.
Yes.
So we call that the Youth at the Booth program. It's a great way for young people to get involved. Yeah, and imagine what a great thing that is to put on a college application or on a job application that you were, as a 17-year-old, working as an elections official. So really, this is something that all Ohioans can participate in. Often during times like this, people are looking for a way to give back and looking for a way to make a difference. Well, signing up to be a poll worker is a way to do that, and it may just start a new habit for you. Hopefully you're back in November as a poll worker as well.
And the poll workers you do get, are they normally of the older population, and how much of the strain does coronavirus put on you in that regard?
We've actually had 2 people call in and say that they were going to self-quarantine and not be a poll worker for this election. So it's had no adverse effect at this point.
Can you give your name and title, please?
I'm Kim Horn, Director,
Kim, how do you spell that?
H-O-R-N.
Just making sure.
K-I-M?
Yes.
Oh, I was just double checking. And have you heard people who are typically been poll workers who, because of the concerns that are out there, that they may be getting cold feet about whether they want to be interacting with the public throughout the course of
Again,
the long
just
day?
the 2, not, yes.
Ms. Orr, can you speak to those efforts specifically that you're doing here in Knox County to try to engage that younger population? Are there specific things you're doing right now?
Yes, we're definitely trying to do an outreach, and I know that when the students come back to college, that they have a packet that we'll put an insert in for an application to be a poll worker in the fall when they resume classes, and they'll have a registration card in there and an application to be a poll worker.
A question for you, Frank. I mean, with older voters being more susceptible to the coronavirus, is there additional outreach trying to encourage them to vote absentee or vote by mail? I mean, can you talk about what's being done to make sure that they can still vote but also not put themselves at risk?
Yeah, quite a bit of it, including what we're doing right now, right? We're trying to spread the word at the Ohio Secretary of State's office. That's been our focus for the last couple of weeks, because remember that we've been having an active conversation about the concerns related to coronavirus for several weeks now. And so going back 2.5 weeks ago when early voting started in Ohio, I've been saying if you're concerned about this, if you're part of the vulnerable population, make sure to cast your vote by mail. It's easy to vote by mail in Ohio. One of the things that I've done in addition to make it easy is we know that absentee ballots by mail have to be postmarked by Monday, March 16th, right? That's always been the case in Ohio. But there are, of course, procrastinators amongst us. And so if you wake up Tuesday morning and your absentee ballot is still sitting there on your kitchen table, there's still time to return it, but then you've got to bring it to your county board of elections. You can't bring it to your polling location under Ohio law. And so what I've asked the counties to do is to make a curbside drop-off available on Tuesday, March 17th, and all the counties are going to be doing that. So if people have their absentee ballot, or if they're just getting it today or tomorrow, then they can still bring it into the Board of Elections. They can drop it off curbside on Tuesday. So that's one way. And then, of course, early voting continues really through Monday. Early voting hours go until 7 p.m. Today and Friday. Early voting continues on Saturday. Early voting continues on Sunday afternoon. By the way, we're one of only 5 states in the nation that allows Sunday afternoon early voting. So this is really, Ohio's a place where there's a lot of opportunities to take advantage of early voting and vote by mail. And so yes, we're encouraging people to do that if they're concerned about coming out on Tuesday.
Can you talk a little bit more about just moving all these polling locations? you talk about just the logistics of how much work goes into not only
Mm-hmm.
moving everything, changing all those plans, but also finding a suitable place as a replacement.
Think about the scope of Election Day in general. You've got almost 4,000 polling locations all throughout Ohio. 4,000 locations all around Ohio being staffed, close to 4,000, being staffed by over 35,000 of our fellow Ohioans. Now, I spent 10 years in the military. That's like a division and a half of infantry, right? I mean, 35,000 Ohioans that are out working the polls on Election Day is a big mobilization of people to conduct this very important patriotic process that's so much a part of our lives here. Moving polling locations is never easy, right? It always causes concerns, and that's why we've worked very proactively to make sure that people know about it. But the kind of things that have to happen is not only finding a new location, but signing a contract with that location owner, right? Making sure that it's ADA accessible, which is not negotiable. Our polling sites have to be accessible to every Ohioan, and that's just how we operate. Making sure that there's plenty of parking, and then getting the word out. In some cases, they had already scheduled the delivery or even made the delivery of the voting equipment and locked it in a secure place at that polling location, so they have to go retrieve it from the old location and then move it to the new location. So yeah, there's a lot of logistics involved, but I have every confidence that at 6:30 on Tuesday morning when the polls open, that voters will be well informed about where they are to go and vote, and that poll workers will be ready to conduct a safe and a healthy environment, but also one where every Ohioan can have their voice heard. That's our mission. That's what we do. And by the way, up here, what you see at every county board of elections is a bipartisan team. You've got, we've got this time where in Washington it feels like Republicans and Democrats can't agree what day of the week it is, but this really complex logistical job is done by teams of both Republicans and Democrats. That's a good message for people to understand, particularly in a time when we're dealing with a public health emergency like this, that it's Republicans and Democrats working together in a patriotic way to make sure that we can hold an honest election this coming Tuesday.
Mr. LaRose, with the orders you issued on Tuesday, they obviously impacted changes with nursing homes, senior living facilities. The governor is looking to issue more statements further this week. Do you anticipate more changes in polling locations this week?
I do not. And for example, the question has come up about schools. Schools are safe to conduct elections. We know that in most cases schools are configured and should be configured so that the voters and the students aren't coming into contact anyway. We know that school-age students are not the population that we're most concerned about here. I mean, it's very clearly most impactful on seniors, and so that's something that we know. But also in many cases, schools are not holding instruction on Election Day anyway. Because of other concerns over the years that schools have decided that polling day is a day that they're not going to have students in the building. And then finally, it's just simply not logistically practical to relocate all of those polling locations. There are just too many of them. We rely on schools as voting locations. This is the case all over the world, by the way. I've done election observation in other countries, and it's the same thing around the world. Voting is held at schools. It's a government building with the right handicap accessibility, with the right parking, all throughout every community in the state, and so schools are a common place to do it. It's safe to do it at schools. We put out a letter yesterday, and you can see it on our website, which is voteohio.gov/coronafax, from the Ohio Department of Education and from our office, saying that it's safe to hold elections on school property next Tuesday. And so that's not something that we anticipate. Although we're working very closely with the governor and with the Ohio Department of Health. I can't say enough about Governor DeWine and Dr. Acton from the Ohio Department of Health and the really proactive approach that they've taken. I actually issued this order on Monday, so we were well ahead of most other states on this, and that's given our boards of elections time to prepare. Ohio has been proactive and decisive about this and thoughtful about this, and I think that the Buckeye State can be proud of really what we've done to make sure that we're protecting Ohioans.
So what was that moment like when it seemed like you were preparing for an election, and we had this other story going on with the coronavirus? At what point did you realize that those two were going to intersect and some pretty drastic measures are going to have to be made?
So interestingly, it kind of wasn't a moment, right? It was a crescendo. It was we started talking about this in our office probably 3 weeks ago. At that point, it was a mostly isolated thing within Asia and some European communities, and we were starting to talk about, if anybody is concerned about this, take advantage of early voting. And then we said, okay, there's been a confirmed case in the U.S. People should take advantage of early voting. But over the weekend, our team was huddling as it looked like the situation was escalating, and we were saying we need to consider moving from locations where there are senior citizen residents shouldn't be polling locations. We started talking over the weekend with the Ohio Department of Health. They concurred with our thoughts on that, and that's why we were ready to pull the trigger Monday morning as soon as the governor made that declaration. As soon as the governor declared a public health emergency, I think it was an hour later that we put out the order that all 88 counties had to move these locations. And so we were ready for this. It was something that we saw coming, but it's just kind of an example. I was just asked by a national reporter on a phone call in the car, is this something that we've dealt with before in Ohio? And I told him I've only been Secretary of State for a year, so no, I've not dealt with a pandemic, requiring a need to move polling locations. But flexibility, creativity is what elections officials do. I used the example of last year. We had a polling location up in the northern part of the state where the carbon monoxide alert was going off, and guess what they did? They grabbed the voting machines and the tables and they pulled them out in the parking lot and they ran an election the best they could. That's what elections officials do. This is just the world seeing what we sort of do on a normal yearly basis, and that is using creativity and resourcefulness to make sure that the voice of every member of our community is heard.
Specifically with
Yeah.
the sanitation measures that
Sure.
you want local boards of elections to take, are there recommendations that your office has made to individual counties regarding election day itself?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, these are best practices, right? It's kind of the things that our moms taught us, right? Wash your hands and clean up after yourself. So it's basic sanitation. It's using sanitizing wipes to clean down the voting machines. We've got recommendations that we have published for all of our boards of elections that come from the election machine vendors, because these are sensitive pieces of electronic equipment. So you want to follow the recommendation of the manufacturer to make sure that it's wiped down and sanitized. We've also made funding available through our office for the counties to purchase both hand sanitizer and disinfectant wipes. And so that's a reimbursement program that we started at our office where we're going to reimburse them for that work. And so, yeah, those are the kind of things that we're going to do to make sure that it's a clean environment on election day and it's safe for everybody. But we also have responsibility as people to maintain that safe distance from one another, to refrain from things like handshakes, which is a hard thing for me to do, particularly as an elected official. I just go shaking hands everywhere I go, but we had to get out of that habit for now, and of course correct hand sanitation and washing our hands with soap and water when we can, and when we can't, using a alcohol-based hand sanitizer. So.
And I have a question for you. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name earlier.
Michelle.
How do you spell Michelle?
With one L.
Okay, and what's your last name?
Engelbach with an E.
Okay. And
Can you spell that?
yeah.
Yeah.
They're looking so they don't get it wrong. Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
Yeah, we're really
Let me read it off for cameras. Let me just read it off for you guys.
Yeah.
sorry.
Michele, Michelle, Engelbach, Engelbach. I'm glad I know my alphabet. God, that was like very hard.
So, Michelle, my question for you is, can you talk about the moment where you guys realized this might be an issue hosting an election as you typically do, and what's been the mood among some of the people who live here now, knowing that at least that is being taken off the table?
I am going to go with the crescendo analogy over here because that was amazing. Same thing. It just was building. We were starting to look at what kind of precautions do we want to have with visitors and who's coming into our building and who isn't. The election came up in that conversation, and we started to have that conversation of, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? How are we going to protect everybody? And then when we heard of the first confirmed case in Ohio, it was a race to see who was going to call who first. Was I going to call them first? Were they going to call me first to say, okay, what's the plan here? Because I don't know that we can provide that service this year, because we will not put, obviously, our elders at risk, who are the most vulnerable in this situation.
These nursing homes, these skilled nursing facilities, these senior residential facilities around the state are patriotic people that do a really important job. And I was told on Monday that when we sent out our order, that there was a big sigh of relief.
Huge.
From all of them.
Huge.
And so that's what leadership requires. We said, all right, this is what we have to do. Health and safety comes first. We're going to move these polling locations, and I'm glad we did. And it's important to mention also that the residents that live here, that are accustomed to being able to walk down the hall and cast their ballot, are all being given the opportunity to vote. This is the same thing all throughout the state. I was just on the phone yesterday with Cuyahoga County and Summit County and other county boards of elections, and it's a routine thing that we do at senior residential facilities that are not polling locations to bring an early voting opportunity to them, right? So the boards of elections all throughout the state we'll send a bipartisan team, Republican and Democratic election official, to come to the residential senior facility, nursing home, skilled nursing facility, and conduct an early vote for them, so they can essentially cast an absentee ballot right there on the spot. And that's exactly what they've done here for these residents, to make sure that these senior Ohioans are able to make their voice heard, because we don't want to leave anybody out of this election. Yeah.
Mr. LaRose, is this your first stop? You mentioned you're going statewide, different places, and kind of how many places are you going to kind of give this press conference?
Well, as many as I can. I was in Montgomery County yesterday. I was in Portsmouth the day before doing an event down there. So I'm traveling the state quite a bit, but we're doing all we can to get the word out, including radio interviews, TV interviews, and that kind of thing. Because again, it's about making sure that Ohioans are informed of a few very simple things. We're relocating the senior facilities. We've been listing 4 things. We're relocating polling locations from senior residential facilities. We're encouraging Ohioans to take advantage of early voting and vote by mail. And by the way, if you're going to vote by mail, you've got to request it really effectively today to leave time for the law allows it through Saturday, but as an effective matter with the Postal Service, you really need to request your absentee ballot today. Also, the sort of best practices that we're following as far as health and sanitation, and then recruiting poll workers. Those are the 4 things that we're encouraging, and we really appreciate all the help that members of the media have engaged in. Again, like I said, bringing down their paywalls to get the public service announcements out there, it means a lot. And we all have a responsibility to just sort of look out for one another. I spent a bit of time on the phone last night with my grandparents, and they're very active, late 80-somethings, and they travel, and they're very engaged. But we said, hey, Grandma and Grandpa, let's stick around home for the next couple of days, the next couple of weeks. Let's we'll bring your groceries to you, and this kind of thing. We just want to make sure that we're protecting our senior Ohioans, and my grandparents thankfully took advantage of vote by mail just a couple of days ago, and so that's a great way to do it as well.
And
Time for about one more,
those-
guys.
In terms of those applications, are there any efforts underway to power up some manpower, get a little bit more manpower for, say, Monday, when you're getting those requests that are coming in from Saturday, to try to turn those around as quickly as possible if you're expecting any increase in those because of this situation?
So the boards of elections very routinely this time of year bring in extra help. I know that around the state that they're doing that. They're going to be ready. The boards of elections, they want to turn these absentee ballot requests as quickly as possible as well, because if they don't, then they'll be getting the calls on Monday night and Tuesday morning about where's my absentee ballot. Something else Ohioans should know, and this is something a lot of people didn't realize, and this is one of these learning opportunities for a lot of people, is that you can track your absentee ballot just like you track a package you order online, right? So in Ohio, if you go to voteohio.gov and click on the link that says track my ballot, you can find out what day the request was received at the Board of Elections. You can find out what day they mailed it back to your home. You can find what day it was received back at the Board of Elections. And another thing, and we're always pushing back on rumors that people come up with. For some reason, elections are a fertile ground for people coming up with conspiracy theories and rumors. And you always hear this rumor that vote by mail ballots are only counted if the results are close. That is the furthest thing from the truth. In fact, what Ohioans should know is when you see results at 7:45 and 8 o'clock on election night, those very first ballots being counted are the absentee ballots, because the results from the polling locations are still coming downtown to the Board of Elections office. And so if you want to have your vote be the very first one counted in Ohio, then cast your vote by mail. It's a great way to do it, and all Ohioans should take advantage of it.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Did you